and welcome to Our People, the podcast where we give space for Holdeman Stories. We focus on hope, healing, and inspiration. Connection, consciousness, and love are the driving motivations for this project. Remember to have grace for those who have chosen to speak out and share their experience. Please enjoy the story you will hear today.
Well, I'm here with the Our People podcast. I'm telling Holdeman Mennonite people's stories. I'm Billy. Today I'm here with Stanley, and we'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself. And the hour is yours. Just share the story that you feel like people need to hear.
Thank you, Billy. Yeah, this is Stanley Unruh. I grew up in the Greensburg, Kansas congregation. I was born in 1954, which makes me almost 70 years old. I'm 70 years old here in a month. So I grew up in the age when the Holdemans used to send their kids to public school, and that was just something everybody did. I mean, it's all I knew growing up. You went to public school. So we kind of had two lives. I grew up on the farm. Of course, church was a big part of my life before I went to public school. My maternal grandfather's name is Lincoln Jantz. He was a big revival minister. So he was kind of in pursuit of for revival meetings every winter. It seemed like he was gone a lot. My other grandparent was instrumental in starting Bethel Home and built a lot of missions down in Gallup, New Mexico and Arizona and that type of thing. He was also a big farmer around the area. So, I mainly grew up with my cousins and Holdeman friends from the congregation. And spent a lot of time, I guess, kind of an introvert, built tree houses and did a lot of daydreaming. And that's kind of what I spent my time with. And dreamed about inventing things. But anyway, school was kind of an eye-opener, I guess. I remember being very intimidated in public school because none of the other kids in my class were Holdeman Mennonites. I mean, I didn't know any of them. They all had TVs. They had, they talked about the programs I watched the night before. And I guess I just kind of, being the introvert I just put my head down and everybody just sort of ignored me. And I kind of bumbled through school that way. It just barely made grades. And but I guess my experience with the church, every meeting every year we would have revivals, and revivals were always kind of a traumatic time. There would be hellfire sermons, 2 or 3 weeks of hellfire sermons, of course. What the invitations are like. They're singing Just As I Am, and you're wondering, should I stand? Should I stand? And the butterflies are just pounding around in your stomach. And so I'd go through that every year. But I was young. I think my brother was 13, and he stood up during revivals. And I decided I would too. I remember because I was all worried. I was worried about this salvation thing, this thing going to hell. And I would ask my mom about it a lot. Well, kids don't go to hell, right? If I died today, I wouldn't go to hell, right? No, you wouldn't. But at some point I would, right? Yeah. Well, when is that? It's the age of accountability. Well, when's the age of accountability? I wanted to know. Well, some people say it's around 14. It could be earlier. It could be later. Oh my God, this is too risky. Risk hell and heaven. I'm just having 3 more years of whatever. And so, I stood up and went through the whole conversion experience. I mean, supposedly I was converted. I mean, all I did basically was I made some confessions to my parents. Hey, I'm sorry I lied to you that time. And, I had one brother and one sister. And would try to dream of something that I had done to them, which, because you had to confess your sins. So, I approached the whole Christian thing with that mindset, I guess. And I don't remember much about my later years. I mean, things didn't change much. I had the same friends. The only difference is during revival meetings, I had to go to council meetings, and that's when I started. That's when things got kind of heavy, you know. I remember the shame I felt during communion when we all had to take our shoes off and our socks off and march single file, the men on one side and the women on the other, and walk in front of these preachers that had these little wash tubs, and they'd sprinkle a little bit of water on their feet. I don't know. It was just humiliating, and then kiss you, you know. It just was not a good experience. It was something I dreaded. Um, and so all during my youth, at some point during my youth, I discovered music. My cousins, older siblings, had transistor radios or record players or whatever. They knew about popular music, country music, rock and roll, and so I got kind of hooked on that. When I was 14, I bought my first transistor radio. I mean, this is just a little thing. Transistor was just kind of new back then. You could actually have a radio and hide it under your pillow at night. Bring out an earphone and listen to KOMA in Oklahoma City. The Rolling Stones, the Creedence Clearwater Revival, and Led Zeppelin, or you can listen to country stations. I kind of fell in love with music. So that was the first kind of, what would you say, sins, where I was purposely going against the church, purposely hiding things from my parents. My parents would find the transistor radios and hide them, and I would either find them or go buy a new one. I was just kind of defiant in that manner. But nobody wanted to talk about it. It was the elephant in the room. My parents would hide my radio, or it would all of a sudden disappear, and nobody says anything about it. That's just kind of the way it was in our families. Somewhat dysfunctional, as most Holdeman families were, but it certainly was not. It was a good family. I mean, there was a lot of love in the family, I think. Or I was treated well. There wasn't any abuse or, voices raised in anger too much. My father was a fairly gentle, kind man who I don't remember that he ever whipped me. So anyway, that kind of takes me up to in my childhood. I guess later on, when I got a little older, of course, I'm going to public school, so I'm also getting, a lot of seeds are being planted for thinking outside the box, the Holdeman box. I'm being introduced to literature in high school. I'm reading Steinbeck, classics, and just realizing there's a lot more life out there. And I loved it. I loved the music. I loved the stories. I just loved the world, you might say. But also, I loved being in good accordance with my family and my community. So how do you balance those things? So I've spent 20 years, probably 20 years trying to balance those things, trying to walk in between, walking up to the line. And back then you could get away with quite a bit in the Holdeman Church. This is before the famous panel. You've heard of the panel probably, that came in the late 70s. So, I mean, I had a hot car, 67 Mustang with big wide tires and the back end jacked up and radio aerial blaring and, black pinstripes and all that kind of stuff on it. And they let me stay in the church. 8-track. I mean, I didn't hide anything, I mean, like I said, you could do quite a bit and get by. And it was sort of cool not to be in accordance with the church. It was sort of cool, at least among all the kids, to sort of be walking that edge. And so there was a period where a lot of the kids at my age just left the church. It wasn't anything. They had too many friends uptown. I see you. So eventually, I was able to go to high school. I graduated in 1972. I think my sister graduated in high school in 1977. So it was a year or two later, they finally built their own school. And kind of stop the bleeding, you might say. I mean, they had kids bleeding. We were learning other lifestyle as Holdeman lifestyle, And I'm sorry that the kids today don't have that experience to go to public school and get exposed to the world and learn what's normal in life. So I knew what was normal and I wanted it and I couldn't have it, So anyway, so I guess going on into my late teenage years, I did get expelled when I was in my late teens, I think. I mean, I can't remember that it was for anything besides just finally not, just too many rules broken and admitting to them that no, I wasn't right with God. I didn't pray, I didn't read my Bible, I didn't, none of that stuff. So, the final they expel you. And it's tough living right in the same vicinity as your family, or a lot of times, most of the time with them during that period. And you come upstairs the next morning and there's a little tray set at the edge of the kitchen. This is where you're sitting now. Nobody talks about it. So, I got sick and tired of that too. That's tough to take. So how do you balance those two things? Finally I left. I think I was expelled another time. Maybe I was like 20 or 21. And at that time, it seemed to me I was leaving for good, but I still stayed in the community. I was in Greensburg, just working odd jobs, had a agricultural business for a while. And at that time, I got involved with some younger Holdeman kids who were learning to play guitar. And I'd been playing guitar for a while. It was one of the things I kind of picked up during my, because of my love for music. And so they asked me to join them. We wanted to start a band. So we actually had a 4-part rock and roll band, all ex-Holdemans. It was kind of fun for a while. So anyway, yeah, there's a lot of stories in that too. But eventually I got tired of living the life I was living. I mean, I was single. I was partying with, younger kids not too far out of high school. And just, I didn't really have much direction in my life. My social life kind of consisted of going down to the bar, and it just wasn't, I got tired of it. I really wanted to settle down, find a mate, find a woman. So I started looking at the church. What I admit now is an act of desperation, but it seemed to be the thing at the time. So I think I was 26 years old when I joined the last time. And I guess and one thing I haven't talked about is any relationship with God that I may or may not have had during that time. I would say probably did not have. And, I probably maybe believed I did, or at least knew what the hoops were that you had to jump through in order to supposedly have an experience with God. I mean, you kind of, you hope for the best in those kind of situations. So anyway, I guess two things happened. I lost my resolve to stay away from music pretty quickly. Getting together with the other guys in jam, I was just a little bit too tempting. So I started backsliding, and at the same time, I'm thinking that there's this woman who's interested in me in the Holdeman Church. I mean, there was rumors of that to that nature, and I'm thinking, okay, this is when things are finally coming together. I've made this sacrifice. I went back to the church. Now God's going to reward me. Well, it turned out it was just a rumor. I mean, I got contacted her, and there was nothing to it, and it was just like, okay. At the same time now, this bandmate of mine had decided he had been to high school too, and he had a high school friend that said, you really should go to college. And so he said, I would like to go to Dodge City 3 days a week and take a few courses just during like one semester. So would you go with me, Stan? And I was doing construction work. I didn't have a lot going on. I could probably get my work done in the other 3 or 4 days of the week. I said, yeah, I'll do that. And it was an eye opener. Back when I made such poor grades in high school, now all of a sudden I was doing A's on everything. And algebra was a breeze, and literature and English. And I wouldn't say they were a breeze. I mean, I worked hard, but I was into it. I think I saw it as my salvation. So bottom line is I left the church. Yeah. I joined. I think 6 months later I was out of there. And I think I saw education. I saw my potential there. I saw my ability to, get along with people of that nature and mix in with that, which I had known before. And all of a sudden, I tell people I was saved. That was my salvation, education at that time. And so I took the community college classes and then got a scholarship to Kansas State University and went up there. I'm studying engineering. I ended up getting a bachelor's degree at Kansas State University in 1987, I guess. And went out, worked in industry for a couple of years, still single, and kind of missed the university life. And I applied to graduate at Kansas University in Lawrence. And it got accepted, got a scholarship there. And so I spent 4 or 5 years in the early 90s at Kansas University. Lived just right off campus there. And I ended up with a PhD in mechanical engineering. Did a little bit of teaching at the university after that, but not too much, and found a job or two, worked a couple jobs here in the industry around the area, Topeka and Kansas City. Worked with holographics was my main industry. Designed machines that would emboss holographics onto film, and then also did robotics. Still write software for a local robotics company. So that's kind of my life, career life. I guess marriage, I did marry when I was 40, when I got my PhD in 94, and married a woman who had 2 children from another marriage. And we had a child between the two of us. Let me back up a little bit on the spiritual. I mentioned spiritual things a time or two, and there was along with my education, there was, in my mind, there was also a revelation into religion for me. Friend loaned me a book that was titled "The Skeptic's Guide to the Bible," and in it, the author points out all the inconsistencies in the Bible, all the atrocities, and you can look them up. There's more categories than that. I'm not being able to, but it had a big influence on me. Not because the author wrote it so well or made such a convincing argument, but it was just a reference. Hey, you can look it up yourself. And I lost any faith, any belief in a God or certainly the Christian religion, and remain that way during this period, and was comfortable with it. I remember when I first had the revelation, like, I don't think any of this stuff is true. I don't have to worry about this afterlife stuff. I just need to be a good person. So I got married when I was 40, and her father she was not a church, but her father was a Methodist, and he thought it would be nice if we went to church. So, and for her girls too, just part of it. So we went to a local Methodist church. It was a beautiful church, big stained glass windows and high beams, and huge organ that just blasts every Sunday morning, and preacher gets up and tells nice stories, and just nice stories that have good morals on good living. Wasn't a lot of, certainly no hellfire preached, or not even, in a lot of cases, not even that much Bible, but that was fine with me. But at the same time, one of her daughters, one of my stepdaughters at that time, was having some school issue. So she's kind of diagnosed with ADD and was getting made fun of in public school. So my wife wanted to take her out and homeschool her. I said, oh, okay, that's fine. And then the other girl wanted to homeschool too. So she's homeschooling two girls, and she finds a community of other homeschooling moms. And you might guess it. I mean, it's in the Christian community, and that's kind of popular in the kind of conservative Christian communities. Homeschooling is. So she starts going to these meetings with these other women that are kind of, raising kids in homeschool, and starts, wanting to go to different churches, basically be saved, evangelical, and tries to convince me to follow her path. And it was something that it never did work well for me. It's something I went along with just for, we changed church, and I kind of, the people that we went to church with were nice, and it was a community. It worked for a while for me. Probably went, I don't know if it was a decade, but it was a number of years we were involved in that. And during this time, I'm kind of, well, I'll put it that way. The marriage wasn't ideal to begin with. I mean, there were parts of it that I kind of knew from the beginning might be a problem. I just didn't have the guts to deal with them at the time and make the right choice, I guess. So there were problems, and I got divorced in 2000. At that time,
can you say that year again, Stanley?
2010. Yeah, just a dozen years, or 14 years ago, I guess. So, and about that time, I kind of discovered the music scene around Lawrence, Kansas. Town has a pretty good music scene in it. And I had been absent from, any instruments or playing. I mean, I always had a guitar. I would play a little bit just for my own entertainment, but not for anybody or anything. So, but about the time of my divorce, and my ex-wife didn't like my guitar either. She didn't want to hear me. So I mean, that was a big factor too. So I started taking my guitar up to town and playing with other people, and ended up from there going to open mics and kind of had a few shows actually. I played at a few bars in town, and that's been a hobby of mine ever since. I mean, I've had a lot of fun playing guitar. Matter of fact, matter of fact, today, this afternoon, we had a group of people over. We were strumming acoustics in the living room. Same thing happened yesterday. So it's a good life. I'm retired. I got remarried. Actually, even after my divorce, got married to a wonderful woman, and we've just our life has just been an adventure together since then. So, I've got a good. That's my testimony, I guess. And as far as going back to I know a lot of this, people are interested in religious beliefs. And I would say I did not retain my religious beliefs. I would still call myself an atheist. I just, it is something I can't help. I mean, I know too much. I've studied this stuff. I I I just can't. I can't square it. I just can't. It's the way it is. That's the way it is. So anyway, that's my story. The one guest I talked about that I talked to that I heard, Laverne, I guess, um, talked about there's a lot of dark stuff, sexual abuse and stuff like that. And you know, I can say I didn't have any of that. I mean, my growing up was pretty normal. It seems to me like people around me. I didn't know of any scandals or anything. And as far as conflicts with other church members, I didn't. I don't remember ever being angry, or I got along with the preachers. There were people in the community that I liked and respect and worked for them at times. I mean, we had a pretty good rapport.
Mhm.
So I don't have conflicts. I didn't even have any big arguments with them when I left. I mean, I was just let them know I'm through with it. You can expel me if you want. I don't want any more.
It seems like a lot of it changed when this privatization of schools and panel time, and then the new way of really inspecting people more closely at revival time. I think those three things really are where things shifted, and they have set a trajectory that now it is so insular that people don't know any different. They don't know anything outside. And even if they do, they don't trust it. And so they go, like with myself, I had plenty of opportunities to be out, especially with my mom and all of her tirades. I mean, there was a point where she told me, she said, I can't believe you keep going back to that church when I try to take you out of it. She just did not understand why. But you know how it is that they have their ways. My dad had cancer, died, and so it was just my mom and we had seven of us boys. And so of course, these people come along providing free childcare while mom is trying to work and taking us to church. What can she say? And so of course, all the
Yeah,
while they're
yeah,
turning us into Holdemans in the background.
right.
Um,
Well,
yeah,
it's a culture too. So especially if you went to their school and grew up in it.
yeah,
Did you?
yeah.
Some of
And
the
so
time anyway.
yeah, so yeah, I only ended up really I went to part of high school because when we moved to Colorado, she didn't wish me to go there, but the state said if she's not a practicing part of the church, then I must go. It's compulsory there. And so I did go, and I tested in, and I got to go in at 11th grade, and I went in and it was fine, although it socially it was terrifying going
I bet it
from
was.
that to this high school where we had almost 2,000 students. It was just like a stampede. I mean, I was totally the first few months were horrible. I just did not understand what was happening. And then it over time I really grew into it, and I actually became quite popular in the school, and yeah, it was a really interesting time. But I still wanted to get back to the church. And so I did that. And then going to college there, and of course, being at Heston's the original congregation. We are the example. We have to be the best congregation.
Yeah.
We're the example for everybody of what the church should look like, and the standard's high, and they really, the staff there held a very hard line. Um, and they, I don't know what does I mean they just the bar was so high depending on who you were, and there's kind of that, but something interesting um to me, and I think I see a lot of this probably has happened since the insularization part, but abuse, like child sexual abuse specifically, is very high. There was a study that I had some connections with. It's been a couple of years back now, and when they inquired with Holdeman, and I don't remember exactly how many people they talked to, but 85% of the people from Church of God in Christ Mennonite who responded indicated they experienced that.
Wow.
And I had I knew that it was happening, and I knew that the church was trying to suppress it, but I did not realize how prevalent it was, but also what they did. I mean, what we were even talking earlier today about the case, and that was like 2015 or something. They told people in the church something totally different than they told the world. You know, the policy that they presented to the world was still not great, but at least it legally covered their ass a little bit. But then on the inside, it was very much this martyrdom of, the church is being persecuted by the world. We're taking up a special offering. We are not going to disclose what the amount is. And I remember at the time thinking, this is just so terrible that people just don't understand, and they're trying to take advantage of the church, and then just, frame of
Wow.
mind. And looking back now, I'm just shocked at how naive I was. But you don't know what you don't know. And so I have to give myself grace. But I remember just thinking that, this is crazy. This is wild. How could this happen? These things, this is probably not even true. And that's horrible, because it was, and it was. And there's a lot of things still that are coming out in relation to that. But yeah, I think I'd be curious to hear your opinions on, that transition, and then going through panel time, what that was like for you and others there at Greensburg. And yeah.
Yeah, the panel was kind of a big thing. We heard it was coming. We heard about it through the grapevine from other youth at other congregations. Oh, the panel was here, the panel was there, and we heard all these kind of horror stories, and we're trying to imagine what could this be like, And one day here they show up in Greensburg, several carloads of light blue Chevy Impalas full of bearded men pulled into the church parking lot, and they make appointments during the day, like Thursday afternoon. Your appointment is 2:30 on Thursday afternoon. You be there, and so you got to take off and make plans to take off from work or stop whatever you're doing and go down there and sit in the corner of the auditorium and be facing these. I don't remember. I mean, the number always varied. The people on there always varied. I think I was with them 2 or 3 times. And I heard horror stories, and not horror stories. I mean, how horrifying can it be having somebody ask you a question? I mean, it can't be horrifying, but it could be uncomfortable for a lot of people, I guess. Personal questions I understand were asked, and I don't remember that. I can't think of anything really inappropriate that was asked. Maybe so. Maybe they did, and it just seemed so mainstream. I don't remember it. I don't know. But it was kind of a tough time for the congregation. I know that. I mean, a lot of people were thinking about leaving, thinking maybe. And our congregation had almost split before then. We had a little, what would you say, little satellite congregation that opened up in another little tiny community about 20 miles away from the church. And so it wasn't a Holdeman church. It had been like a Lutheran church or something in this tiny little town, and with stained glass windows, kind of a worldly look on it, and kind of a real inviting white screen or white porch, and it was a sweet little building. And so pretty soon that was the cool thing to do, is go to Wilmore to church on Sunday night, and that was where all the people hung out. And those that were a little bit on the edge, would go to church there, and a minister from, I think, Montezuma would preach there a lot. I don't remember. Daniel Kane's brother, Ernest Kane, I think. So, I'm just rambling here. I mean, that's kind of my memories of it. I don't I don't have any nice little conclusions to wrap it up with.
That's okay.
What's that?
That's okay. You know, you don't have to have things prepared, especially when it's a spot question. But um, it's interesting to me how, you know, it was rumored and they seemed like they were very organized about what they were doing. Um, and I wish that I'll have to look back, you know, on old notes I have because I'd studied some into it and knew some of the key people that were involved back then, and it's you know, those things eventually slip you, um but it's interesting to see um what has happened. And I think too the church's strong use of the avoidance caused those of us who came later or were still in, like, I don't know expelled people other than, like, you know, my immediate people close to. I mean, I don't
Oh, really?
never knew
Yeah.
anybody.
Uh-huh.
Every once in a while, um you know, in our work with the manor, there would be people who were expelled for many years and they were back in the church, and they would be, you know, residents. And it'd be interesting. It was always interesting to hear their perspective of that time and what happened. Uh, and they're yeah, it's interesting, but also church members who went through it are kind of tight-lipped about it. They don't want to talk about it, and I think for some there were some traumatic things that happened. Um, and I can certainly understand that because I feel like um, I feel like in some ways a lot of that same approach happens with the revivalists that come, and depending on what kind of things they feel a congregation is lacking, sometimes kind of depends on which revivalist they call in and what they say and do. And there's a, you know, there's different ones who, you know, through the years that we saw. Um, there's one, and I don't remember his name, but he came out there to Homeland when I was, you know, I don't know how old, 9 years old or something, and he, you know, I just remember being shocked at just how loud I mean, he was so loud up on that rostrum, I mean, and we just sat there in silence. You know how it is sometimes those sermons, they're so hard. Um, and yeah, I don't know. Did you have any of those?
Oh, yeah. I remember some hard sermons. There was a man by the name, I think he was from Heston. His name was Harry Wanger. You remember the
Yeah,
name?
Harry from Heston.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's probably died before your time. I don't know.
Yeah. I knew of him, but I don't know that we ever met. I don't remember when he died, but it was, well, not that long ago.
Anyway, I don't know that he was so, he would get loud. He was quite dramatic.
Mm.
I mean, he was you know, he kind of got your attention, and he could get angry. And I remember one time he was preaching, and he gave an invitation at the end and revivals, and I didn't stand, and he came right back uh, quickly to my seat as soon as he got off the rostrum. And the young man said, "I didn't see you standing tonight," you know. And I said, "Well, I didn't feel convicted." And then he said, he put his head down and acted real sad, and he says, um, I just can't believe it. A man your age, 20 years old, who is not interested in, you know, getting right with the Lord or whatever, you know." And he really sort of put me down, like, you know, you scum, you know, how
Yeah.
could you be such a low character as to not, I mean, where's your intellect? Where's your soul? You know, what's wrong with you? It's the manner in which he asked it. Like, I'm sad, you know.
Mhm.
But I wanted to talk a little bit about the expulsion. You know, I mentioned being expelled several times, and I mentioned coming up the next morning and seeing my table on a, you know, my plate on a separate table there in the family room. Um, when I was married, the first time coming home quite a bit to my parents' place. And no, this is before I was, well, anyway, there was a time I was home for dinner. I would come home to mom's for dinner on Sunday, and she would have company over. And one time it was this couple, older couple, who had been to church in the morning and they were considering joining church. They were from another Mennonite church and their last name was Jan, I remember. They were considering joining. And I don't remember the event, but evidently my mom had sat at my own little table, and these people were appalled that anybody. I mean, to me, it was just normal. This is, I mean, I'm over it. You know, this has happened so many times. I mean, I don't even notice it, and they're just appalled. And I don't find out about it until years later. I happened to be delivering some Christmas gifts one night for the help of my mom to some older widow ladies, and she told me about that incident, how that their hearts just sank, and her husband almost decided then not to join because of that. But they joined anyway. I guess the sense of community was too strong for them, and they wanted the community, you know. But anyway, so that's kind of a reference to, you get so used to something and you don't realize how it looks to the world, you know, and that's kind of an eye opener, I suppose, for a lot of people that leave, that, you know, all of a sudden you're seeing yourself or people where you came from a little different. You know, it's not normal anymore. So
Yeah, I think you're right. There's there's a lot of things like, well, I didn't question it at the time, but like looking back in college when people would hear about different things, you know, they would ask me questions and they would almost get angry sometimes. I remember there was a set of twins, and their parents had been expelled. I think actually maybe a bit from Greens. I don't remember anyway. They were Unruhs too. I don't remember anyway. That's been long enough ago. We'll never trace it. But I remember she came. We were sitting in the dining hall and we were talking about church discipline because that's what Mennonite college kids talk about, I guess. And and she came and she pulled the tables apart and she says, "You sit over there. How would you like it if I told you to do that?" You know, she just was outraged and stormed out of the dining hall. And I remember thinking, like, you know, she's got to be in her bonnet. Like, what is the deal here? You know, what, you know, this is necessary. We have to do this. You know, she's lacking something that she's not willing to see that, you know, and you know, and it's just interesting how, you know, your mind goes through those hoops and that's normal. And then looking back now, I'm just like, well, of course, this is
yeah,
kind
yeah,
of a socially abusive thing to do to somebody.
yep,
And it's very primitive.
uh-huh. Yeah, I agree. I agree. An experience I had in grade school when I was just a kid. You know, like I said, I was introverted. I wasn't, kind of made fun of by a lot of the other kids. Um, but so I felt really inferior. I felt inferior that I was a Mennonite. I couldn't get in on their games. I didn't know anything about their social life. Um, but on the other hand, I was always told that they were going to hell. See, these were not the chosen people. We are the chosen people. I am. So that I felt guilty about that. Here, I'm going to heaven when this kid over here next to me isn't. No fault of his, and it's nothing. It's it it's not because I did it. You know, I'm raised in the right church. That was kind of the conflict that I had in my head a lot during grade school. So there was a lot of there was shame. It seemed like all through my growing up of being a Holdeman Mennonite, you know, just feeling less than. So yeah, it was good to break out of that eventually, to grow up.
Yeah.
Some of us it takes a lifetime to grow up.
Yeah. When you grow into new things, you know, I've worked
Yeah.
with a lot of older people and it's like every decade you kind of have a new version of yourself almost. It's kind of the way somebody put it. And I like that because I feel like, yeah, it feels true. Um, you know, we change and develop in new ways. And Well, I guess like one question that I ask a lot of people kind of as a wrap up is, what would you say to people who are still in this church? What kind of message would you have for them?
I would say, don't be closed-minded about the world. Investigate things. I mean, the problem is that they don't have any opportunities very many. I mean, it's hard to show a young person, logic or what the world is like without them being able to reach it or being able to rub shoulders with it. Um, you know, I don't have. I would just say get out. I mean, get out, get alive. But then I realize the problem is that their social life. You can't expect somebody to leave their family and their parents, and it's all wrapped up in their social life. It's a web. It's a tight web. There are a few people that do get out, you and I and other people, and kudos to us, I guess. As long as we're happier. I mean, I would say too. I mean, just do whatever makes you happy in life. If that church, that social life, if that makes you happy, fine. But investigate what the world is about. Learn something. Learn something every day. Learn a little bit about science, history. Go to the library and check out a book. That's not in the Holdeman Library. Learn about evolution. Learn about space, the cosmos. About supernovas. And galaxies far, far away. Once you figure out how big the universe is and the awesomeness of it all, these other things seem pretty small. Not having the collar turned up just right, or making a dress that has a belt with such and such a width, or the hair's got to be back, and no brown shoes, only black shoes now on Sunday. It's you look at that picture of the Earth from the moon that the astronauts took in 1968, Christmas Eve, 1968, and you think about all of us here on this Earth, and some people are worried about whether their shoes are black or brown, and think that the creator of all that really cares. Just use some logic. So that would be my suggestion to any person. I mean, don't be afraid to think. Just don't be afraid to think. You can't go wrong thinking.
Yeah.
Apply logic. Learn something. You're not going to change your mind about things overnight. It's a slow process. But some people are born with the desire to do that, and some aren't. Some are just happy with the status quo.
Yeah.
That's my father's did this, and my brothers are doing this. This is where my social life is. You really don't question everything. And like I say, if they're happy with that, then go for it. Just don't force it on your kids, though, or anybody else. That's where the problem is, because the system is set up to trap. By avoiding somebody, ostracizing them, which is a terrible thing to do. It's an awful thing to do. Took your own kid, and now you can't eat at my table anymore because you've got a love for music and you have a transistor radio or whatever.
When it comes
how
back to it, that's pretty
damaging
pretty
can you
silly.
get to a kid? Wow. So I would say that the Holdemans look at the terrible damage you're doing to the human, to the human soul, to our inner beings.
What do
Let
you
us be who we are.
let people be who they are?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Be what you must. It's a part of the plan. The lyric of a song I've been working on.
I like that. What do you think of some of the Canadian Holdemans having brown shoes at church?
They
That's been a whole
got to be
deal.
going to hell.
I Yeah, I saw pictures from a wedding and I was kind of I still have that within me where I go, oh, there's a part of me that if they aren't following their own rules, I'm annoyed. Because I feel they need to comply. If they're going to have their rules, they need to follow them. I'm a rule follower even now, I'm afraid, but now I just obey the speed limit, whatever else. And most Holtmans don't do
Yeah,
that.
it's the other thing I've noticed. Well, my parents are both gone now, but they were at Bethel Home. They both passed away within the last 2 years, actually. So I spent a lot of time at Bethel Home. So recently, I would say a lot of time. We were out there probably, every 2 or 3 months, a day or two, for the last 2 or 3 years, and so rubbed shoulders with Holdemans in the last 2 or 3 years than I have for quite a while. But it's been interesting to see the transformation. The girls used to wear skirts above the knee, a couple inches above the knee, and their hair was all puffed up. Of course, maybe the hair is still the same way. But now girls have longer skirts and they're very uniform the way they're dressed. Everybody has a cell phone now, and the same things that we were expelled for back then, which were listening to music, watching TV, those two things basically, that's on their cell phone now.
Hmm.
It's very accessible, and it seems to be sort of mainstream. All these things that were supposedly a death sin, they were going to send you to hell because you wouldn't conform and stuff. You take your radio out of your car, for instance. Now they're walking around with them in their pocket, and I understand it's just it's because of the technology. It's a byproduct of technology. It's just so easy, and our phone is so convenient.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like karma, having something that something that it's like a Trojan horse, you know.
And
Bring the enemy, bring the enemy inside
it's working.
because it appears to be something useful. A phone is useful, having something to check,
Yeah.
look up information.
I think they're doing everything they can to keep control. They have church filtering systems that track not only where you go on the internet, but who you talk to, where you're located. I mean, the staff know all that now, but yet the youth know how to get around it, or some of them have two cell phones, so they can watch YouTube and whatever else without calling that nice lady in Canada at Cloudvale. I remember calling up there, and I was actually using YouTube for work at the manor, and I had to call up there and ask for permission to get on there. Um, and she goes, "Well, before we unlock this, I have to advise you about our church guidelines and it's just like, this is the craziest thing. Like, what kind of world are we in where I call some Canadian girl to ask to open up a web page for church work? I mean, just the circles that are going around. But in some in some ways they have really tightened things down, but in other ways they've had to surrender because they know if they press too hard, they're just going to leave. Because the youth of today, I know they are taking in a lot of information and they're learning things. And at the same time, because of the social structures of the church, they don't want to leave either. So they're trying to do what they can to work on the church on the inside. They really are changing some things in good ways.
Okay.
And COVID helped with that a lot. COVID, I found out how to get around things and I listened to some podcasts. And there was one by somebody who's actually a really good friend of mine now who is expelled Amish. And then another podcast was by somebody who was in another plain Mennonite group, and she specifically interviewed people leaving plain groups in the Plain People's podcast. And I listened to those things and heard people's stories and realized the similarities and the control that was happening and what was hiding behind all of that. And then that's when I said, it's the spell is gone. I know better now. And that
Yeah.
information, then I was willing to go. And I have been a pretty fierce advocate and am willing to talk with members who are willing to dialogue about different things. And really, when it comes down to it, if people become knowledgeable and they're unwilling to leave, that tells me they're benefiting from the system in some way if they're not
Yeah.
willing to leave it. So that's a big part of those things. But uh it's very interesting hearing the different perspectives from different time periods of things, because I do feel there was a time when the church really um they had the rules, but the people were living more as general people and not so much um secluded society members.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's interesting to see what all's going on with that. But there are some really horrible things about it all. And in the end, I think it will have to just come folding down in some way. But there are good things happening, and I remember that there are good things happening inside. Whether they like it or not, they can't control everything. COVID, we never would have let people make a video call from the manor, and now they do it all the time.
Uh,
There's
uh,
still someone there. I don't have their phone number, and I can never quite tell who it is, but they video call me from time to time on WhatsApp, and I just see their neck, and they don't seem to know they're calling me, but they're doing it. They're getting on the WhatsApp and doing these things, and they'll call their children, and that just we never would have had that. We never would have allowed it. I mean, even the manor's internet that all the residents had access to was filtered by I mean, there was no, they didn't have any choice. And now here they are.
yeah.
So getting that time already.
Yeah, it's probably about that time.
Yeah.
I had a little story I was going to tell. Now I can't think of what it was.
Uh-huh.
That's what that's the way a 70-year-old mind works. You
Yeah.
capture something, and pretty soon it's like a net that has little holes in it. Things just kind of filter out.
Yeah.
So anyway, my story's gone. So yeah, I mean, you remind me of stuff. If you remind me of stuff, I've got a lot of stories to tell on Holden. It's just hard to come up with on the spot.
Yeah. Well, and especially you've lived more of your life out than you have in.
Yeah, oh yeah, way more, way more. I'm very comfortable with being outside. I mean, I would never consider joining. I wouldn't even consider. I'm not even interested in religion, basically. So, um, I know nature, music, friendship. These are the things that life is made of. These are the things that give me joy, give all of us joy. Poetry, literature. I mean, there are so many things to live for. I don't feel like I have any need for an afterlife. I mean, it's I don't expect it. Um, I don't dread it. I knew nothing before I was born for eons. It wasn't bad. I expect the same thing to happen after I'm gone. I'll just be gone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that there is a copy of our mind, our thoughts, our personality being uploaded someplace into a place called heaven so that we can live on. All of our thoughts, our personalities, our biology, every thought you've had or quirk that you've got, it's wrapped up in the neurons in your brain as patterns that have been burned there. When you die, that rots away. It's gone. I've never had anybody explain to me how this works. Is there like a feed from Earth goes up to heaven, so all this stuff is captured? You can kind of relive someplace else? No, it's extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I say.
Well, the language with which you put that was interesting to me. I'm almost making it using computer terms to describe this transfer of data, basically,
Yeah,
that we've recorded in our minds minds drive, and what does that mean, and what are the thoughts of a soul? you know
Yeah, yeah.
so
Is
anyway.
a soul I think a soul is just a accumulation of all the things that we call us,
Mm.
our thoughts, our emotions, our nervous system,
Uh,
you
well,
know.
we're getting late, so I suppose we'll go ahead and go. Is there anything last things you want to say now? And of course the way is always open to, um that's a very Mennonite thing to say. The way is open.
The door is always
Yeah.
open.
You have the option to record more. You have liberty to come
I have
late.
this farther liberty. Yeah.
You have liberty to have the
You
introduction.
you could have a whole program on just the little sayings that have been passed on.
I didn't realize we had such a cryptic cult language. I mean, there's things that we were talking about that the other day with our as organizers group. We chat every day, really, in some way. We're talking about, there's so many things that are like Holdeman code that mean something else to the outside. Because I remember,
Uh,
especially when I first left, I would say certain things, and people would be like, "What does that mean? Why are you saying that?" Or that seems kind of offensive almost. And I'm like, "Well, I don't, I, I'm not making a judgment call. I mean, I remember it took a while to understand that, we have a different dialect."
yeah, yeah.
Things.
And when you call a whole family by the father's first name,
Yeah.
that's Dale's. Dale's coming over here, and like it makes sense in a way, but it's sort of a unique way of talking.
Yeah. Well,
Outside of
it's
that.
it's just supporting the patriarchy. I mean, because
Yeah, yeah, it is.
other patriarchal systems, I don't really think they use that either. I mean, I've just never heard of that. So that was
But it's real. Is it real common still in the Holdeman Church?
yeah,
Calling the whole family by the father's name and putting a plural apostrophe behind it,
yeah,
like his
yeah.
his kids, his
That
family.
possessive
A
term. Yeah.
possessive, right? Yeah.
It's still common. Every once in a while you hear somebody, but it's almost like they have to be intentional about it. But I remember, I shouldn't say people's names. I remember a certain somebody got up one evening and called it out. Said somebody was saying, and our custom is, I don't know how, feel bad. It was Johnny Becker. I don't know if you know him. Anyway, um, but he got up there and just this whole diatribe about, I heard so and so and said their name and everything. And so yeah, he called them out. So I'm calling him out. And he says I heard them talking about they're going over to Stephen Joyce's XYZ, and remember our custom is this, we want the world, to reflect that we follow God's designed headship order, and we want to make sure that we aren't giving an improper witness. And I'm just, at the time I thought, well, that makes sense. That's a good
So
idea. And
he
now,
was making a case for using just the patriarchal language. Then is that what he was doing?
yeah, well,
He was
and
trying to say it should be Steve's rather than Stephen Joyce's.
yeah, and that was the whole deal.
Ah,
And so if people try, and that's how, how, and there's not that, but many other things where people they will do something even accidentally, and it turns into a doctrine class evening service, for preaching service, where, here's why the church has this conviction, and this is why you should, keep, I mean, some of those things. And I realize now most of our sermons, they weren't truly about biblical text. They weren't about the life and example of Jesus. Even from a humanistic point of view, Jesus is a very great figure. But the Holdemans have twisted Jesus into different things. Jesus is meek and lowly. You should be meek and lowly and obey the staff. That was like the next words that would be coming. And it's like, well, no, that's not true. Jesus, like all humanity, was meek and lowly, sometimes a little stubborn. And having opinions and emotions aren't sinful, because me getting frustrated that the staff put up with some kind of thing happening in the congregation, and I call them out on, and they don't like that. Then comparing me, to being a rabble rouser, it's like, well, Jesus turned over tables and got really frustrated when people were doing these same things. And now we have dismembered Jesus, and we have, made a new Jesus. There's these things that are happening. And when I started to piece that language together in my mind, that was one thing that really kind of set things rolling. But yeah, it's very controlled. You slip up and say one thing, or even, and I don't, there's so many things looking back, it's like somebody had to set this up for it to be something where you'll quick just reprove somebody for something. I mean, you know, one thing I heard once, you are too bold. And I'm just like, well, what does that mean? You have to be more specific, because somebody living in their everyday life, not making, strides to step in front of cars or whatever. I mean, what does bold mean? And I eventually dissected that down to, I'm being too critical and I'm questioning things. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and
You're
they have,
boldly questioning.
yeah. Well, it seems to me, if somebody has a question, if you're not willing to give a good answer, we should evaluate why we
Yeah.
aren't doing XYZ. And those kind of things. I ask a lot of questions. I'm a rule follower, but I'm still going to ask questions to see if it's a rule worth following. If it's not, I'm going to question it and why. And if you can give me a good answer, sure, great. I mean, I don't know. I've never been able to hold myself back from that.
Well, it's probably about that time, you think? Around 10
Yeah,
o'clock?
I think so. My dog is asleep behind me already. He's probably like, why don't we go to the bed? But yeah, it was good to chat with you, and I'm sure there'll be more. I'll go ahead and turn the taping off.
Thank you for listening. It is an honor to connect with our guests, and we wish the best for them as well as our listeners. Remember to like and subscribe for more episodes. Our People can be found on all major podcast platforms as well as YouTube. If you are interested in sharing your story, please contact us at ourpeoplepodcastteam@gmail.com. Thank you.